So friends, welcome to this new chapter of CFA Level I Economics. The name of the chapter is The Firm and Market Structures. So just to give you an idea, let me take example of two nations. One is India and another is USA. Now, India has, technically speaking, around 2.6 million registered companies. 2.6 million registered companies. And they are distributed across several industries, approximately 80 to 90 industries, right? Similarly, in USA there are 33 million companies, approximately 33 million registered companies, and they are also distributed among 80, 90 or 100 industries, right? Now, why do I keep the numbers flexible 80, 90, 100? Because there are new additions of industries coming up every now and then, right? Generative AI was not an industry before, but now it is. Even a few decades back, food delivery at home was not really an industry, but now it is. Delivering books, delivering gadgets, delivering equipments to your home. Now it is an industry itself, famously started by Amazon. So we are keeping the number between 80 to 100 different industries, and in them there are a certain number of players. Now, depending on the number of players there are, depending on the price points they are quoting, depending on their ethical situation, the industries can be divided into different kind of market segments. For example, let's say we take the example of smartphones. Now, in smartphones, we can easily say that the market is highly globalized. The movement of phones, delivery of phones, purchase of phones happens across the globe, and the makers are not necessarily situated in the country where the purchase is happening, right? So India is one of the largest purchasers of iPhones, for example. India is one of the largest purchasers of iPhones. But Apple is a company from USA, right? Apple is a company from USA. Similarly, there are multiple other companies like Samsung is there, like Motorola is there, like Microsoft is there, Google is there, even Tesla came out with their smartphone, right? So there are multiple players in the smartphone segment. Similarly, even if you take a commodity as regular and as simple as rice, there are certain number of producers, certain number of distributors, certain number of retailers who are bringing the rice to the consumer's table, right? Now, depending on how these suppliers, how these distributors, how these producers behave, the market can behave differently. For example, let's say there are only 5 or 10 companies. Now, among themselves, they decide that enough is enough. We are not going to compete in terms of price. And what we'll do is, we will together increase or decrease the price. What they are saying is, they are agreeing between themselves that because of competition between themselves, what is happening is their profit margins are getting reduced. Now, these 5 or 10 decide one day that we are going to decide on the price together. Nobody is going to undercut the prices. Now, this potentially can lead to something called collusion or formation of a cartel. This is one situation. Second situation is, let's say there are millions of farmers producing rice, let's say in India or in USA, right? Now, they are pretty unorganized. The market is very unorganized. Now, what can happen is, between these millions of farmers, there can be immense price competition. Now, for this reason, rice may be available at such prices where the farmers hardly make any money. Now, you are the same purchaser who is going to the market to buy rice, and rice you are getting at such a price that the farmers are not making profits, right? On the other hand, you go to buy a smartphone. I am not saying smartphone is a cartel or a colluding industry, right? I am just taking an example. Smartphone is not a colluding industry. Smartphone right now is not a colluding industry. But if it so happened then what would happen? I'm just taking that example. So let's say you go to buy a smartphone, and the smartphone makers make a margin of 50%, or let's say 100%, or let's say 75%. Now, these two different markets for different products are completely different, right? Again, one more thing can happen. Let's say in USA, let's say there are 30 telecom industries, right? And in India, there are 3 telecom industries. Now, what can happen is there can be much more price competition between these 30 telecom companies. And because there are only 3 telecom companies, they can actually decide amongst themselves and keep the prices in such a way that there is high amount of profitability. But in actuality, what happens in the market is something quite the opposite. In India, the cost of data is 25 to 30 times less than the average global rate of data. In India, even if there are 3 telecom industries or 3 telecom companies, the rate at which data is available to Indians is 25 to 30% less than the global average. And in USA, the data rates are soaringly high. Even if there are 30 players here, right? And one more peculiar example let me take in case of India. In India, there is something called the commercial vehicle industry. In USA also it is there. In what this is basically trucks, buses, heavy equipments, mining equipments, all these vehicles, they form this commercial vehicles industry, right? Now this commercial vehicle industry consists of what? Trucks, buses, right? Trucks, buses, tippers, all these kinds of equipments which are for heavy lifting or transportation, passenger transport, goods transport, commodities transport, all these things, right? This is the commodities, this is the commercial vehicle segment in India. Now there are majorly 2 or 3 players. Let me name 2 players. There is one player which is Tata Motors, and there is one more player which is Ashok Leyland. Now you might think that there are only 2 major players in this industry. There must be some kind of collusion between them and the profits might be soaringly high. But it is just the opposite, friends. These 2 companies have immense price competition, and the pricing that the truck industry gets in India or the bus industry gets in India is immensely competitive. It is immensely competitive, right? So what we are talking about here? We are talking about things in 2 ways. One is the price at which the consumer is getting, and the profits which the producers and the distributors are making, right? The producers and the distributors and the retailers are making, right? These things decide what kind of market structure a particular industry is indicating towards. It can be a perfect monopoly. For example, even a couple of decades ago, in USA, NASA was the only organization which was making spacecrafts, right? NASA was the only organization in USA which was working largely on spacecrafts. But then came Elon Musk and came SpaceX. Then came Jeff Bezos and came Blue Origin. But before Blue Origin and SpaceX were there, only NASA was largely building the spacecrafts. So it was largely a monopolistic segment. Then let's take an Indian example. Even 30 years back, India had only one life insurance company, which was Life Insurance Corporation of India. Life Insurance Corporation of India was the only life insurance company that India had. So this was again a monopolistic company, right? We can take multiple other examples. For example, railways in India is a monopoly. Now we have spoken about monopoly, right? We have spoken about monopoly. Now we have to understand what are the advantages and disadvantages of this kind of a structure, monopoly. So first thing is, let's say if this is a matter of national security, like spaceships can be taken as a matter of national security. So having a monopoly or a near monopoly structure can be good if handled well. The disadvantage, if it is under the hands which is non-regulated, there can be huge amount of margins that the consumers have to pay. So the profitability can be high for the producer of that monopolistic product, but the consumers may have to pay for that, right? That is one disadvantage. Now, to get rid of this disadvantage, what we have to do, we have to bring in competition. We have to bring in multiple players in the same industry. Like previously it was NASA who was building spacecraft. Now we have NASA plus SpaceX plus Blue Origin who are working in the spaceship making industry. Similarly, in India, in the LIC segment, we have, in the life insurance segment, we have Kotak Mahindra, we have HDFC Life Insurance, we have ICICI Life Insurance, we have SBI Life Insurance. Like this, multiple life insurance companies have propped up. So the monopoly which was there has been broken. By this, what happens is the market structures improve, the efficiency of the markets improve, the consumers are treated better, the consumers get better service, and product innovations also happen more and more. Product efficiency, operational efficiency, cost efficiency, everything improves in that industry, and consumers ultimately benefit, right? Now, from monopoly, we will move into more and more fragmented structures of markets. Progressively, there are only 4 kinds of markets if you talk in terms of fragmentation. The first we have already spoken about, it's a monopoly. The second one is oligopoly. Oligopoly. The third one is monopolistic competition. The fourth one is perfect competition. So as you can see, my friends, here we are moving from one company leading the pack or one company existent in a single industry to a few more, to many more, right? So first we talked about monopoly, then we can talk about oligopoly, where there are 3, 4 or 5 players, let's say, right? For example, the telecom industry in India, which we spoke about, there are 3 players only. Or you can say the space industry in USA, which has only 3 or 4 players. SpaceX, Blue Origin, NASA, these are the players. Even this kind of structure can be available in the commercial vehicles, you can say, in India, like Tata is there, Ashok Leyland is there. So oligopoly is an industry which is not monopolistic, but there are only a handful of players, right? Because I said the word players, let's take another example of oligopoly. The IPL. This is again based on cricket, which is mightily popular in India, and there are like a dozen teams playing this franchise, right? So there are only 12 teams playing here. So you can say this is a kind of an oligopoly, right? Now we will look at what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of having an industry which is oligopolistic. So the first factor that we said is there are very few players. Like telecom industry in India has only 3 or 4 players. There is potential for, I'm not saying there is potential for price collusion. So the limited number of players can together decide that we are not going to undercut prices of each other and we are going to enjoy the profits. Few things that can happen in this case is consumer will have to pay high prices, product innovation will be less, and there can be regulatory entry barriers created. Just to prevent new players from coming in. So these are the 3 major characteristics or possibilities, negative possibilities in an oligopolistic market. In India, the telecom industry is just the opposite. It's not an oligopoly which is creating collusion, but it is an oligopoly which is creating immense amount of benefit to the customers. And this started in the year 2016 when the brand Jio was launched, they completely revolutionized the pricing of data in India. Previously, the data that was available in India was actually peanuts compared to what was available after Jio was launched. So from here we can learn an advantage that if there is an ethical player which actually looking at the benefit of the consumers, then this oligopolistic market can also benefit the consumers as a whole. And Indian data consumption has been revolutionized by the presence of Jio. I can take this example without a shadow of doubt. Now we will go to the next example. A few more examples of oligopoly which has immensely benefited the Indian consumers can be named here. First one is the food delivery segment. Food delivery segment. There are two major players in this segment which are Zomato and Swiggy. Zomato and Swiggy. They are enduring thousands of crores of cash outflow or negative cash flow just to grab market share. They have been enduring thousands of crores of negative cash flow just to grab market share in India. Despite there being only two players, they decided to compete fairly and squarely just to grab market share. And the end result is the consumer has benefited. The consumer has benefited. Another example, the cab driving industry in India especially, it is dominated by players like Ola and Uber. Ola and Uber. Now they have revolutionized this industry. They have created immense amount of conveniences for the consumer, but they have charged a premium for it. But nonetheless, we would prefer a premium brand which is giving good service in this case. So this industry also has been revolutionized by the presence of an oligopoly. So as I said, with these three examples, telecom industry in India, food delivery industry in India, cab driving industry in India, these three oligopolies in India are all three examples where presence of very few players has resulted in immense benefit for the consumers, not in a collusion. Then we come to monopolistic competition. Now what do we mean by a monopolistic competition? This basically means that there are a number of players. Let's say 20, 40, 50 or even more number of players, right? But there are a few players who are giving very, very differentiated products. There are a few players who are giving very, very differentiated products which are largely accepted and loved by the consumers. A prime example for this you can say is smartphone segment. A prime example is the smartphone segment. There are multiple players across the globe, but a brand like Apple has a special place even in this hyper competitive industry. A brand like Apple has its own place and it has lasted. So this is a kind of monopolistic competition. There are multiple players, there is huge amount of competition, but there are differentiated product or service providers in the same industry who are standing out. And it does not mean those who are standing out will always stand out. They can be replaced by someone. But for now, at any given point of time, you will see there are multiple players who are competing among themselves very aggressively, but there are differentiated players standing out also in the same industry. So smartphone is an ideal example of monopolistic competition. Another example that we can think of right now is the chocolate industry. I'm taking a very niche small industry. It's a chocolate industry. I'm talking about Indian chocolate industry. Okay. Now in India, there are multiple chocolate brands, but two stand out. One is Cadbury, obviously, and the second is Hershey's. Although there are multiple other brands like Nestle, like Amul, like Mother Dairy, they are also there. Multiple players are there, but a few players stand out because of their delivery, because of their brand recall, because of the legacy they hold, whatever can be the reason. These are the examples what we can think of in terms of monopolistic competition. There is price competition, there are huge number of players, but there are certain few players, selected players who stand out in terms of their product delivery, product quality, or brand recall, or legacy, or multiple other, or likewise. Another industry where I can see monopolistic competition in terms of definition is, although it might look like a commodity industry or a perfect competition industry, it is not. There are differentiated players. It is the Indian real estate industry. Indian real estate industry. Now, although only 14% of this industry is actually organized, 14 to 15%. If I might be a little off on this number, very less amount of the market share is among the organized players or the listed players or the organized players. But there are few players among this also who command a certain amount of premium. Let's say in a local way, let's say in Western India, a brand called Oberoi Realty commands huge level of premium and respect. Then nationally there are players like Godrej, Macrotech, DLF, Purvankara, Mahindra Realty, Tata Realty, right? All these players are there who command a respect. But again, even if I call them national players, truly speaking, only Godrej has a largely distributed number of developments. It has developments in Eastern India, it has developments in Southern India, Northern India, Western India, everywhere. Truly speaking, Godrej is the most nationalized real estate company that is present right now in India. And these brands that we spoke about, either locally or nationally, they demand or they command a premium, right? So this is another example of monopolistic competition. Why? So this is another example of monopolistic competition. Why? Because there are a plethora of players. There are local players, there are big players, small players, nationalized players, branded players, unbranded local promoters. But in that mix of heavy competition and proliferation, still there are players who are differentiated, who are offering different products at a premium, who are commanding a premium, right? So this is another example of monopolistic competition. Then we come to the fourth kind of market, which is perfect competition. I think those in US will relate to this. In USA, when it comes to buying corn or apple, I'm not talking about the phone, I'm talking about the fruit here, corn or apple or wood. Does brand really matter? Does brand really matter? I think mostly it will be, answer will be no, right? Even there can be a farmer's market, local farmer's market from where you can buy. There can be organic small producers from whom you can buy, right? You can buy it from the Walmart, which is packaged. You do not care about whether it is Peter's corn or Harry's corn. You do not care about it. As long as the quality is good, you know the quality is good, at par with the market, you are ready to buy it, but you are very sensitive to the price also, right? You are very sensitive to the price. Let's say the same quality of corn, somebody is selling at $10 and somebody else is selling at $15. Obviously, all the sales will go to the $10 guy. There is perfect competition in this kind of a market. So what is happening here? Basically, here the thing which is lacking is differentiation. Differentiation of the output or the product or the service is not there. Corn, a good quality of corn is a good quality of corn. It doesn't matter what the packaged name or the brand says. It is Peter's corn, it is Harry's corn, doesn't matter. It is the corn quality and the amount of corn and the price of corn that matters. Similarly, it can be building materials. It is the grade and quality which matters. Brand hardly matters, right? Although you can say there is a role of the brand, because people trust a few brands that they will provide the quality that they are committing, other brands will not. That factor can be there. But still, if they charge a hefty price, people will not buy from them. It is that kind of an industry. Typically, commodity industries fall into this category. This can be rice, this can be corn, this can be sugarcane, this can be sugar, this can be petrol, or gas. It doesn't matter which petrol pump you're taking the gas from, right? As long as the price is good and the quantity is genuine, right? It does not really matter. So here what is happening is there is no differentiation. There is no differentiation from one product producer to the other product producer. And the price differentiation is also not tolerated by the consumer. Somebody is not willing to pay a very hefty price for the same amount of whichever commodity that person is willing to buy. So this is a perfect competition. Here the producer is a price taker. On the opposite side, if a collusion or a monopoly is unregulated, unmonitored, then they can become the price deciders, right? They can become the price deciders, and that can come at a heavy cost to the markets, to the consumers. So these are the 4 categories of markets that we have spoken about. Once more, first is monopoly, which has only one player virtually. Second is oligopoly, where there are handful of players. It can lead to collusion, it can lead to benefit to consumers also, depends. Then there is monopolistic competition, where there are huge number of players and among them few are standing out because of differentiation of their offerings. Then there is perfect competition, where there is no offering difference. Producer to producer, there is not much difference. It is the quantity and the price which matters. So these are the main 4 kinds of markets that are present. Entry barriers. So we will now one by one understand in more detail certain features of each of these 4 markets. First, we'll talk about entry barriers. So what do we mean by entry barriers? Entry barrier is something that a company possesses which other companies are not able to breach or penetrate or beat in the markets. It can be a brand. It can be cost of production. It can be some patent, right? It can be some technology or patent, and likewise. Now, in all these 4 markets, what are the degrees of entry barriers? Firstly, in case of a monopoly market, the entry barrier is absolute because it's a unique product. Entry barrier is absolute because it's a unique product. No other company makes or creates that kind of a solution. For example, in India, railways is a monopoly. No private company is into railways business. Nobody is making railways and taking people from one place to the other. Only the Indian Railways is doing it, right? And it's a government undertaking. So this is, you can say, a monopoly due to government regulations. Now, a monopoly can also be due to unique technology. For example, NVIDIA has certain kinds of cost efficient and energy efficient GPUs, which are the prime requirement for Gen AI technologies or generative AI technologies. What do I mean by generative AI technologies? Everybody has heard about ChatGPT, right? So the platforms on which these kind of advanced artificial intelligence works are basically NVIDIA GPUs, right? And no wonder, because it has acquired a certain level of monopolistic dominance in this market, the stock market is soaring. It is lusting, or somebody else will breach the technology, that is a separate matter. NVIDIA itself will breach its own technology, that is a separate matter. But right now they are in a very, very dominant position. We can say it's a monopolistic position. Second is oligopoly. It will be clear if I take the example of telecom in India. The telecom industry in India was revolutionized by the entry of a brand called Jio, which is part of the Reliance Group. Right? Which is part of the Reliance Group. Now they invested around 2.6 trillion rupees. They invested around 2.6 trillion rupees to build a nationwide infrastructure in India, which was dominated by optical fibers, right? Now this kind of money, 2.6 trillion rupees, although it is in rupees, which means it is like 30 billion dollars. This is around, but this 30 billion dollars, investing this 30 billion dollars is not an easy feat for any new company, right? It has scalability issues. So this is an entry barrier because of scalability issues, because of large scale of economics that the telecom industry enjoys. Especially we saw it with Jio when they laid out the infrastructure across India by taking a debt of 2.6 trillion rupees, and they converted into investable securities later on. They converted this debt into investable securities. This was called InvIT. So we'll talk about InvITs and REITs later. Right now we are discussing about oligopoly and the entry barrier in oligopoly, right? So this entry barrier in oligopoly is also pretty high. So in monopoly it is high, very high. In oligopoly also it can be very, very high. In infrastructure companies, let's say in port building, in shipbuilding industries, there are a handful of players and the cost is very high. The cost of entry is very, very high. So entry is not that easy, right? Sheer terms of scale, in terms of sheer scale, it is not very easy. Then we can take another example, the example of SpaceX. SpaceX is part of an oligopolistic industry, which is the space travel, the futuristic space travel industry. There is only two major players in USA who are SpaceX and Blue Origin, right? Now, their advantage is cost. They can make the rockets at much lesser cost than the conventional or the traditional makers of spacecrafts, and this is their added advantage. And they are making reusable spacecrafts. So it will take you somewhere and come back, land, take some other people and go and again come back. So they are making spacecrafts which are reusable. They land softly. They take off like any other rocket, but they land very softly. And that's what creates the difference, right? Soft landing. We have heard about this from Jerome Powell a lot, right? Soft landing. So this is what SpaceX does. Or the Blue Origin does. They land the rocket very softly, and that creates a lot of difference. And if Fed is able to do the same, I don't think we have to worry about the stock markets for the next decade. But there are question marks to that. At least temporarily, there are chances of a short period of like a correction or a recession kind of a situation. There is a possibility of it. Now, coming back to the point, oligopoly. We have spoken about entry barriers in oligopoly. So oligopoly entry barriers are high. What about monopolistic competition? Here also there is some. Let's take the example of FMCG industry here. FMCG industry. In India and also in other countries, we can take the example of companies like Unilever, Nestle, Hershey's, Gillette, right? They are in different domains, but there is P&G. Like this, there are hundreds of FMCG companies even in the Indian market. But already you can see that there are a few who are at the top of the list with their differentiated brand recall or differentiated product, right? For example, Unilever is there with their huge brand recall. Then there is Nestle. Then there is Hershey's, who are into the chocolate domain, right? Then there is Gillette, which is into shaving, P&G. So all these are differentiated brands among the hundreds of brands that are present in the FMCG industry, and they do have some entry barrier. But When we say entry barrier, the question is how difficult is it for a new entry company to scale up, and how difficult is it for a company to gain market share. In terms of these two criteria, we have to say that monopolistic competition has moderate to low entry barriers. New brand can enter and can get market share much more easily than in an atmosphere like an oligopoly or even a monopoly, right? Entry barriers are comparatively low. Many new brands are there. We can take multiple examples like that. Let's say, let me take an Indian example here. Naveen Marico had to compete with the giants of the industry to gain market share, but it was able to gain market share in the FMCG industry itself. Then there is Imami, again, it started as a very small brand, but then it scaled up and it was able to access brand ambassadors like Shah Rukh Khan and Amitabh Bachchan to enhance its national footprint and become one of the dominant brands in the same industry. They were lesser players to begin with, but they ultimately were able to scale up to an extent where they started getting compared to the Unilevers of the industry. So that's how this industry fared. Now we come to the situation of perfect competition. How are the entry barriers here? Well, a situation of perfect competition is where the businessmen or the producers are the price takers. So entry barriers in terms of product differentiation and price differentiation is very, very low. You can say it's non-existent almost. It's non-existent almost. Very, very low. Entry barriers are very, very low, right? Examples of such industries, obviously, it can be rice, cotton, corn, building materials, right? These are basically commodity centric industries which are in a state of perfect competition. That is, there is hardly any product differentiation, hardly any price differentiation. And if somebody wants to take up the prices, then they might lose market share. But still some differentiation can be made in this kind of an industry. How? Let us see in the next point. Non-price competition. What do we mean by that? Competition can be done in many ways. One can be in terms of price, which is the direct competition. That somebody is selling in $10, I'll sell it in $7 and I'll gain market share. That is the most straightforward way of doing it. But you can only do it if you have cost efficiency. If your cost is lower, you can sell at a lower price. So let's say, I'll take the example of Nvidia here. They can give the same output at a much lesser cost because their production cost is also low, right? Their production cost, their scalability costs are also very, very low. But what if it is not there? Then the margins get affected. The profits are hampered. This is what happens in perfect competition, right? Now, to avoid this kind of a scenario or to gain advantage even when there is no such price differentiation possible, what companies do is they take advantage of something called non-price competition. Let me take an example here. During the recent sports tournament in India, there was a new car insurance brand launched. The name was Digit. The name of this insurance company was Digit. Now, if somebody says car insurance, do you have a really big brand recall? No, right? Apart from Digit. Why? Because this conducted huge amounts of advertisements. In the World Cups, in the T20 World Cups, right across the tournaments, they have done lots of advertisements, and their brand ambassador and investor is one of the sporting superstar of the Indian nation, Mr. Virat Kohli, right? So Virat Kohli becomes the brand ambassador of a digit car insurance, which really, uh, apart from making all the facilities digital, there is not much differentiation in terms of premiums or in terms of insurance amounts or anything like that. In terms of the core product, there is not much differentiation. In terms of user interface, yes, there is differentiation. In terms of the ease of getting the payment once some damage to the car happens, yes, there is differentiation. But in terms of the premiums and in terms of the costs, in terms of the returns, in terms of the coverage, there is not much difference. But because mainly of the advertisements, even in a very non-differentiated industry like car insurance, they could make a place. Digit insurance could make a big mark, right? Because they were able to reach out to a lot of people, and the face was a very trusted and loved face of the Indian sports fraternity. So this kind of competition is called a non-price competition. What about Nvidia? Is it a price competition or a non-price competition? So non-price competition can be at the level of product also. At the level of product also. And this is where Nvidia at the core is differentiated. It has a much more cost efficient or much more high output, low cost product. But on the surface, ultimately, it gives less price because its customers are all businesses. It's a B2B business. Price becomes of prime importance, right? Price becomes of prime importance. And that is where Nvidia is far, far ahead of its competition. So its core is, it has a differentiated product, but on the surface, it is a price competition. Now, at the different market levels, what is the level of non-price competition required for differentiation? So for a monopoly, there is no competition as such, but to reach out to clients, it has to have some means, right? That can be sales, that can be marketing also. And in terms of marketing, mainly what it can do is advertising. So advertising becomes a means of non-price competition for a monopoly. What about oligopoly? Let's say again, in Indian markets, there are three telecom companies. Now, one thing is, now they can reach out to clients faster through better advertising, right? Through better advertising. Also, they can differentiate their product by providing better connectivity. So connectivity is what? Product differentiation. So advertising plus product. In oligopoly, advertising and product both can be non-price competition factors. Then what about monopolistic competition? What is the non-price competition factor here? So in case of a monopolistic competition, again, advertising and product. We can take example of HUL. We can take example of Imami. These are for Indian markets, FMCG products. Indian FMCG products. In monopolistic competition, both product and advertising become differentiating factors, just like oligopoly. Then, what about perfect competition? Ideally speaking, in a perfect competition, there is no product differentiation first of all, and spending excessively in ads, differentiating in terms of ads is also potentially wasteful. So this has none. There are no non-price competitions in perfect competition market. Now friends, we move on to the next section. Porter's 5 forces. So Porter tried to explain at a certain point of time, at any point of time, a particular business or a company faces certain number of threats or certain numbers of opportunities. Now they are decided primarily by 5 factors. According to Porter, there are 5 factors which primarily dictate how a company is going to function, how a company is going to perform. So these 5 forces are, let's say this is a company. and it is surrounded by 5 environmental forces. One is threat of new entry. So let's say Nvidia is making GPUs and somebody else starts making GPUs also of the same quality, right? Somebody starts making GPUs of the same quality. Now that's a new entry, right? So that is a threat. Second is threat of substitutes. Threat of substitutes. Moving further with the example of Nvidia, previously there was a lot of difference, a market difference between the revenues generated by Nvidia and the revenues generated by a company, say Intel or IBM. They were all making processors, right? But Intel and IBM were making more market friendly, more low cost, more affordable CPUs. Nvidia was more into high performance GPUs. But with the advent of Gen AI came a time when GPUs have become the primary source of expenses for the different businesses, and which is much more overshadowing than the consumer business of Intel or IBM, right? Than the consumer business of Intel. So Intel and IBM had huge market clout and market shares in terms of processors. Now that has been replaced by Nvidia, not in the same market exactly speaking, but in the GPU market. Through the GPU market, they have garnered a lot of market share in the processor industry due to the advent of Gen AIs, and Intel has not been able to replace Nvidia in that. So there is this substitute threat. Now let's say somebody comes up with some other kind of processor which is much more improved than the Nvidia GPUs, some other technology, not GPUs. Please understand the difference between new entry and substitute. New entry is making the same product. New entry is making the same product, but substitute is making a completely different product. Completely different product which has higher value, right? Let's say the old phones with keypads are now replaced with smartphones. That's another substitute, right? Now Zuckerberg is dreaming that smartphones might get replaced with smart glasses. Again, that is another substitute. There is a difference between new entry and substitute, right? Substitute means it's a different product altogether. New entry means same product, a different company is making it. Now you have a competition. Previously you didn't have it, now you have it. Or previously you only had 3 players making it, now you have 4, right? So these are the differences between new entry and substitute. So we have done 2 forces. We have completed 2 out of the 5 of Porter's forces. One is new entry, one is substitute. 3 more left. What are they? The third is power of buyers. Power of buyers. Let's say there are 2 Indian IT companies. One is TCS and one is a fairly new company. Let's call it ABC. It's a new company. This company has only 10 clients. TCS on the other hand has 3,000 clients. These are IT companies, mind you. They are providing services in cloud, in digital, in IT, etc. etc. Now ABC has 10 clients from which it is generating all of its revenue. TCS on the other hand has 3,000 clients and adding more and more. Now which set of buyers or which set of clients has more power in this case? Obviously the clients of ABC have more power because they are less in number and ABC is more dependent on each of them for revenue. So ideally the more the number of buyers, the lesser the buyer's power is there and the more the companies can align themselves to being profitable also, apart from benefiting the clients, right? Power of buyers is the third factor. More number of buyers make it easier for companies to operate with profit, right? Then there is the fourth one, which is internal competition between companies. Internal competition between companies. Let's say there are 2 food delivery companies, Zomato and Swiggy. These are Indian food delivery companies. and they are actually making losses of multiple millions, hundreds of millions annually, right? Let's say right now that is not exactly the scenario. The scenario has improved, but I'm taking an example which was just there even like 5 years back or 3 years back. They were losing money like anything. Now, why was this happening? Even if there are two companies, apparently you might say that it's a oligopoly and they should be profitable, each of them. They should dictate the prices, and because the number of consumers is in like millions, hundreds of millions, so they should be profitable, but they were not. They were losing hundreds of millions. The reason is internal competition. Internal competition. They were trying to grab market share. They were trying to grab market share by undercutting each other's prices and essentially trying to make the other non-existent, right? But both of them managed to exist. So internal competition can be a huge reason for performance disruption. What is the fifth factor, friends? The fifth factor is power of suppliers. Power of suppliers. I'll take two examples here. One is Tesla and the other is Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway's insurance department. Why? You will know in a little while. Tesla has created its own infrastructure when it comes to service and product both, right? Service and product both. Tesla has created its own infrastructure. So it has removed the necessity for suppliers or dealers. Generally, if you go to buy a General Motors or a Toyota, you will see there are dealers, right? In India at least, there are dealers for any brands, be it Honda, Mahindra, Toyota, anything. There are dealers. But Tesla, what they have done is they have removed this middle layer. So by doing that, what has happened? They do not have to pay the margins to the suppliers. They do not have to negotiate with the suppliers in terms of strategies, in terms of payments or whatever. So removing this has this benefit. But there is a downside to it also. Tesla is an automotive company, right? It's an EV company and it requires nationwide service infrastructure. It requires nationwide service infrastructure. Unless it builds a proper service infrastructure where response is immediate and satisfactory to the client, it will start losing market share. And obviously, this entails removing the suppliers means there is a lot of added capital expense. Lot of added capex. The second example is Berkshire Hathaway's insurance. Insurance, they have made insurance a D2C product. Much like Digit Insurance, the example which I took just before, they have also made it D2C, direct to the customer. So they are doing telecalls, they are doing advertisements to reach out to the customers directly. They are not using the traditional method of using agents or brokers for selling their insurance. In this way, they remove the middle layer, right? In case of insurance, the capex is not impacted that much, but the reach, the word of mouth reach or the broker, the reach that the broker can provide, that they have to compromise. They have to set up their own centralized call centers or invest in advertisements to reach out to people to sell the insurance. So there's one advantage also, there is a disadvantage also. But generally speaking, the more the number of suppliers, the more the complications can arise, right? Again, I'll take, and this can work both ways. Again, I'll take the example of Tesla here. Although Tesla has no dealers in terms of providing service, but it itself has to procure materials, right? Like it makes its own batteries, but it has to buy the lithium, it has to buy the other electrolytes and stuff like that, right? That is the addition of layers, right? So we have actually heard about Elon Musk talking about backward integration. Backward integration means going as close to the mines as possible to take the lithium also from the mines. So reducing the number of layers, integrating it backward, they want to again reduce the power of suppliers, right? So in terms of these 5 forces, we'll rewind them once again. New entry, the first force is the new entry. The second is substitutes. The difference between substitutes and new entry is, new entry means we are talking about a new company, not a new product. Substitute means we are talking about a completely new product which replaces the old one. Then there is power of buyers. Generally, the number of buyers should be more for the company to profit healthily, right? For the company to have healthy profits. Then internal competition. We already took an example how severe internal competition can take away any profits. Then power of suppliers on both sides, on the distribution end also and on the raw material supply end also. The middle layers, if they are outsourced, they can lead to more competition if there are more dependencies on the outside, right? So these are the 5 of the Porter's forces.
The link to the full class video is given in the description below. Please check that out. Thank you so much friends for being with me till the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more such classes. Share your feedback in the comment section below and share this video with a friend who may find this helpful. For enrollment to practical application courses, internships and CFA curriculum classes, check the description below. Till then, keep watching Finnovation. See you in the next class.